My fiancé posted, "I deserve someone better than what I have right now," without mentioning me. I commented, "You're absolutely right." Then I returned the ring and updated my status before she could delete the post. "I just feel like I deserve more, you know?" She said it the way someone orders coffee. No wait, no warning, just words dropping into the air between us. Something better than what I have right now. I remember exactly where I was sitting. Corner of the couch, left side. The cushion that always sank a little too far because we'd been meaning to replace it for 6 months. She didn't look at me when she said it. She was scrolling her phone, legs tucked under her, completely unbothered. And my brain did this thing, that thing it always did with her, where it immediately searched for the most charitable interpretation. Maybe she meant her job. Maybe she meant the apartment, the neighborhood, the noise from the street. Maybe she meant anything other than me. So I nodded. I said, "Yeah, I get that." And she smiled at her phone screen and said, "Exactly. That was a Tuesday." By Friday, she'd posted those exact words on Facebook, publicly, for 247 people to read, and I would become the first person to respond. Not with comfort, not with a question, with 3 words that changed the entire trajectory of both our lives. Here's what was at stake. 7 months of being engaged. 8 months of saving for the ring before that. 3 years of building something I genuinely believed in. A 2-bedroom apartment we'd toured 4 times, argued over twice, and finally agreed on. A wedding date, September 14th, circled in red marker on the kitchen calendar, the same calendar where she'd drawn little stars around her sister's birthday and stuck a photo of us at the lake underneath a magnet shaped like a pineapple. A future that felt so real, I'd already started thinking about what kind of father I wanted to be. I had given that relationship everything I had. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but completely. And somewhere, without me noticing when it happened, she had quietly started packing herself up and leaving. I just hadn't seen the boxes yet. I didn't realize it then, but the distance I'd been feeling for the past 4 months wasn't a phase. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a season. It was a conclusion she had already reached without telling me. We'd been together 3 years, engaged for 7 months. She worked in marketing at a mid-sized agency downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and a rooftop terrace, and people who said things like brand voice and content ecosystem without irony. I ran project management for a construction firm. Less glamorous, more spreadsheets, a lot of hard hats and site visits and phone calls at 7 in the morning. We met at a birthday party neither of us had wanted to attend. Mutual friends, a crowded kitchen, her standing near the refrigerator looking like she was calculating the minimum time before she could leave without being rude. I was doing the same math. That's how it started. Now here's how it ended. The couch comment bothered me more than I let on. I replayed it that night while she slept. I replayed it at work the next morning. I turned it over in my head like a coin with a strange weight to it. Familiar enough that you keep it, strange enough that you can't ignore it. She'd been different lately. Not dramatic different, not movie different, not screaming and slamming doors different. Quiet different. The kind of different that's easier to dismiss because it doesn't come with evidence. She stopped asking about my day first. Not completely, but she used to be the one who texted me at lunch just to check in, and that had faded sometime around February, and when I noticed, I told myself she was busy. She stopped laughing at things that used to make her laugh. My jokes, my stories, the little observations I'd share about whatever ridiculous thing happened on a job site. She used to find that stuff funny. By spring, she'd smile instead, small, polite, the kind of smile you give a coworker you don't know well. She started spending more time on her phone. Not secretively. That's the thing. She wasn't hiding it, wasn't angling the screen away, wasn't suddenly protective of her notifications. She was just somewhere else. Mentally present in whatever world existed behind that screen. I noticed. I said nothing. Because every time I came close to saying something, I heard my own voice in my head calling me insecure, needy, paranoid. We were engaged. She'd said yes. Why would I blow that up over a feeling I couldn't even name? So I kept going. I bought groceries, made dinners, showed up to her work events, smiled next to her in photos that got posted to Instagram. And I told myself this was just what long-term relationships felt like. That the early electricity was supposed to calm down. That stability wasn't the same thing as distance. That I was fine. The first real crack, the one I couldn't rationalize, happened about 6 weeks before the Facebook post. We were at her coworker's birthday dinner. Nice restaurant, big table, a dozen people I half knew and she fully knew. She was different there. Not different like she was uncomfortable, Different, like she was alive. She was laughing loudly, telling stories, touching people's arms when she made a point, throwing her head back the way she used to do with me. I sat next to her and watched it happen and felt something I still don't have an exact word for. Not jealousy, closer to grief. Because that version of her, the bright, magnetic, fully present version, used to be mine. At home, she was half there. In that restaurant, surrounded by her people, she was completely somewhere else. On the way home, I tried. I said, "You seemed really happy tonight." She said, "Yeah, I love those guys." I said, "It's nice to see you like that." She turned and looked at me then. Just for a second. Something moved across her face. I still don't know what it was. Then she looked back at the road and said, "Yeah, just yeah." One syllable. End of conversation. I didn't push. I should have, but I didn't. 2 weeks later, she came home from work and said something that should have stopped me cold. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her shoes, and said, not to me, almost to the room, "I've been thinking a lot lately about what I actually want." I looked up from the kitchen counter. I said, "Want in what sense?" She shrugged. "Just, in general. Like, big picture stuff?" I said, "Okay. Like what?" She opened the fridge, stared into it, closed it again without taking anything. "I don't know yet," she said. "I'll figure it out." And she walked to the bedroom. And I stood in the kitchen. And I should have followed her. I should have sat down on the bed and said, "Talk to me. Tell me what's happening. Tell me if something is wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong." Instead, I finished making dinner, set the table, called her when it was ready. We ate while a show played on the TV. I don't even remember what show. There were little things. That's the thing about this kind of ending. It doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up in the white space between normal moments. The way she stopped reaching for my hand first. The way she'd answer my text with one word when she used to send 3 paragraphs. The way she flinched, just barely, just for a fraction of a second, when I put my arm around her at a friend's engagement party. The way she said, "We less." Not never, just less. I cataloged all of it and did nothing with the list because I didn't want to be the guy who picked his relationship apart looking for problems. I didn't want to be the insecure one. I didn't want to push her away by acting like things were falling apart when maybe they weren't. Maybe I was just anxious. Maybe I was projecting. Maybe I was overthinking. I was not overthinking. Then came the couch conversation. The one I already told you about. "I just feel like I deserve more, you know? Something better than what I have right now." Said while looking at her phone. Said like she was reading a tweet out loud. Said, "I now realize," like she'd already forgotten I was in the room. I said, "Yeah, I get that." She said, "Exactly." She went to bed at 10. I stayed up until 2 in the morning, staring at the kitchen calendar with the red circle around September 14th. Something was wrong. I finally admitted that to myself at 1:47 a.m. in a quiet kitchen. Something was genuinely, seriously wrong. And the next morning, she made coffee, kissed me on the cheek like nothing had happened, and asked if I wanted eggs. I said sure. She made eggs. We ate together. And I convinced myself, one more time, that I was overreacting. 3 days after the couch conversation, I was in the middle of a site visit. Hard hat, clipboard, walking through a building that was still mostly concrete and rebar, trying to figure out why a subcontractor had installed a load-bearing wall 8 inches off the blueprint. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Then again. Then 3 more times in rapid succession. I ignored it for 20 minutes. When I finally checked it, I had 4 Facebook notifications. Friends had tagged me or commented on something. Or I didn't understand why there was so much activity. I opened the app, and there it was. Her post. Public. Posted 47 minutes ago. Some days I just sit with this quiet truth. I deserve someone who sees me fully. I deserve a love that feels like expansion, not limitation. I deserve better than what I have right now. And I'm finally brave enough to admit that. 212 likes. 68 comments. Heart emojis. Fire emojis. You deserve the world, girl. Say it louder for the people in the back. Finally standing in your truth. I love this for you. He doesn't deserve you, and you know it. I read that last comment 3 times. He doesn't deserve you. There were 50 comments, and not one of them was from her explaining that this wasn't about her relationship. Not one clarification. Not one, "Oh, this is about work," or just having a moment. I'm fine. Just the post. Standing there, loud and public, like a declaration. Like a door being held open so everyone could walk through and see what was inside. And what was inside was this. She had been thinking this, feeling this, for long enough that she'd found the words for it, polished them, packaged them, and handed them to 247 people before she'd said a single word to me. I stood on a construction site in the middle of the afternoon and read that post 4 times. My chest did something strange. Not painful exactly. More like a release. Like something that had been held very tightly for a very long time had just let go. Because here's the thing. I'd been walking on eggshells for months, terrified of being wrong about what I was sensing. And in 47 words, she'd confirmed I wasn't wrong about any of it. She hadn't mentioned me by name. She hadn't tagged me. But she hadn't needed to. The people commenting, the ones saying he doesn't deserve you, they knew. Everyone knew. I was the what I have right now. I was the limitation. I was the thing she'd finally found the bravery to want better than. I stood there for another minute. The foreman was talking. I wasn't listening. I opened the comments section. I typed 3 words. I pressed post. Then I put my phone back in my pocket and finished the site visit. What I typed was, "You're absolutely right." No punctuation drama. No explanation. No anger. Just those 3 words, sitting underneath her post like a quiet earthquake. I finished the site visit. I drove back to the office. I sat at my desk for 45 minutes doing actual work, reviewing invoices, responding to emails, scheduling a call for Thursday, because I needed to be sure before I did what I was already planning to do. I needed to be sure this wasn't something I'd regret in the morning. I replayed 3 years. Not all of it. Just the recent part. The flinch at the engagement party. The yeah. In the car on the way home from dinner. The way she'd looked at the refrigerator and said she was thinking about what she really wanted. The couch. The post. 68 comments, and not one of them from her trying to walk it back. I checked my phone. She had seen my comment. The little scene marker was there. No reply. No DM. No call. Just silence. That silence told me more than anything she could have said. I left work at 4:30. I stopped at the jewelry store where I'd bought the ring. I'd had a good relationship with the guy who sold it to me. An older gentleman who'd spent 20 minutes helping me pick the setting, who'd told me she was lucky, who'd shaken my hand when I'd finally decided. He was there when I walked in. He recognized me. He started to smile. Then he saw my face, and the smile changed shape. I placed the box on the counter. I said, "I need to return this." He didn't ask a lot of questions. He looked at the box, looked at me, and handled everything quietly and professionally, and with more dignity than I felt I deserved in that moment, even though I was the one being wronged. I walked out of that store with no ring and a store credit I wasn't sure I'd ever use. I sat in my car for 11 minutes. Then I opened Facebook. I went to my relationship status. I changed it. I hit save. Then I drove home. She beat me there. She was standing in the kitchen when I walked in, which was unusual because she never got home before me on Thursdays. She had her phone in her hand. Her face was a complicated mixture of things I'd never seen on her before. Shock, anger, something underneath both of those that I think might have been guilt, but she'd packed it down far enough that it wasn't fully visible. She said, "What did you do?" I set my keys on the counter. I said, "I went to the jewelry store." She said, "I saw the status change. Are you serious right now?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "You couldn't call me? You couldn't talk to me first?" I looked at her for a long moment. I said, "You posted it publicly, Brooke. You said what you said to 247 people before you said it to me." I thought that was the conversation. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That post wasn't about you." Let me tell you something about that sentence. That post wasn't about you. I had actually prepared for this. I'd sat in my car for 11 minutes thinking about every possible version of this conversation. And that post wasn't about you, was the one I'd expected. Not because I thought she was honest. Because I knew she wasn't ready to be honest yet. I said, "Okay." She said, "It was about my life in general. My career. The feeling that I'm not growing fast enough. It wasn't directed at you." I said, "Then why did 3 separate people comment telling you he doesn't deserve you?" She had no answer. I said, "Why? When I commented you're absolutely right, did you say nothing for 4 hours? No call, no text, no babe what do you mean, nothing." She started to say something. I kept going. "I've been watching you disappear for 4 months, Brooke. I've been watching you check out and telling myself I was paranoid. I've been walking around this apartment afraid to say the wrong thing, afraid to push too hard, giving you space I didn't even understand why I was giving. And then you went on Facebook, publicly, and handed our relationship to 200 people to weigh in on." My voice didn't crack. I'm proud of that. It wanted to. It came very close. But it didn't. She sat down at the kitchen table. Something in her posture changed. Not softened exactly. More like deflated. like she'd been holding a shape and could finally stop. She said, "I've been unhappy." I said, "I know." She looked up. "You know? I've known for months. I just didn't know what to do with it because you wouldn't talk to me." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I didn't know how to say it." I said, "So instead you said it to everyone else." Here's what came out over the next 2 hours. And I'm going to tell you this part slowly, because it matters. She hadn't been unhappy with just me. She'd been unhappy with the version of herself that existed inside our relationship. She felt like she'd been playing a role, the good fiancé, the responsible one, the one making the reasonable choices, and she'd convinced herself, somewhere along the way, that the role and the person were the same thing. It took her a long time to explain this. It took me a long time to understand it. And when I finally understood it, I had to sit with a feeling that was worse than anger. Because what she was describing, this quiet suffocation, this shrinking, she'd felt it for over a year. A year. And she'd never told me. Not once. She'd smiled at family dinners. She'd talked about the wedding with her friends. She'd looked at apartment listings with me and given opinions on kitchen countertops and bedroom paint colors. And underneath all of it, she'd been drowning. And said nothing. I asked her why. She said, "Because I didn't want to hurt you." I said, "So you posted it on Facebook?" She flinched. Good. I'm not going to tell you I was perfect in that conversation. I wasn't. At one point, I said something sharp that I half meant and half regret. She cried. I didn't. I wanted to. But the thing about finally understanding something is that it takes the emotion out of the room for a while. I wasn't angry anymore, not really. I was just clearer than I'd been in months. She said, "Can we fix this?" If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. And I'll be honest, I sat with that question for a real stretch of time. Because part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me had built such a specific future around this person that the idea of dismantling it felt like demolishing a building I'd spent years constructing. But I thought about the ring in the jewelry store. I thought about the counter where I'd set it down. I thought about the 4-hour silence after my comment. I thought about 200 people reading her post and nodding along and not one of them questioning whether she'd talked to her fiancé first. I thought about the engagement party, the refrigerator, the yeah in the car, the eggs the next morning like nothing had happened. And I thought about myself, sitting in that kitchen at 1:47 a.m., staring at a calendar with a circled date, telling myself I was overreacting. And I said, no, that was 3 months ago. Here's what happened after. The next 48 hours were the messiest I've ever lived through. She didn't leave that night. The apartment was technically in both our names. We'd been subletting since February, planning to move to the new place in the fall after the wedding. So there was a period of about 3 days where we were two people who had just ended an engagement, living in 500 square feet together. It was awful. Not violent. Not even particularly loud. Just awful in the specific way that only deep personal failure can be awful. The silence at breakfast. The way we timed our movements around each other without coordinating it. The fact that we were both on the same couch watching the same TV, both aware that the word fiancé no longer applied, and neither of us quite ready to say it out loud again. Her sister called. Her friends texted. A few people from her agency, people I'd met at events, people who'd smiled at me and shaken my hand, apparently saw my Facebook status change and reached out to her. I heard pieces of those conversations through the thin walls. I didn't listen on purpose. I just exist in a small apartment. On the second night, her friend, I'll call her Qley, came over and took her out. Qley had been one of the people who commented on the post. You deserve the world, girl. She knocked on the door. She looked at me when I opened it. And to her credit, genuinely, to her credit, she looked uncomfortable. She said, hey. I said, hey. She said, I'm sorry. For what it's worth. I said, yeah. Not to be cold. Just because that was the most honest thing I had. She moved out on a Saturday morning. Her brother drove a truck over. He's a quiet guy. I'd always liked him. Actually, we had a good dynamic, talked sports and bad movies whenever the family got together. He shook my hand when he left. He held it for a second longer than a handshake normally lasts. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I closed the door when the truck pulled out of the lot. I stood in the apartment, which was now half empty in the specific ways that only become visible when someone takes their things. The left side of the closet. The second shelf in the bathroom. The mug with the chip in the handle that she'd refused to throw away because she'd gotten it at a flea market in Barcelona when she was 23. That mug had been the first thing she grabbed. I don't know why that detail stuck with me, but it did. The Facebook situation, by the way, had taken on a life of its own. After my comment, that you're absolutely right, and after my status change, a few things happened in rapid succession that I hadn't anticipated. She deleted the post, but not before people had screenshotted it. I don't know who, I don't know why, I have no interest in any kind of internet drama, and I want to be clear that I was not the one who spread it. But those screenshots circulated. And then the comment, my comment, circulated with them. And somewhere in the chain of sharing and reposting and people adding their own captions, the whole thing became a kind of minor moment on a few relationship drama pages. I found out about this because a friend texted me a link. He said, "Bro, is this you?" The post had been shared about 600 times. The comments were predictably all over the place. Half the people thought I was a hero. Half the people thought I was petty. Some people thought the whole thing was fake. I didn't engage with any of it. I put my phone down. I made coffee. I went for a run. Because the internet's opinion of my breakup was genuinely the last thing I had the energy for. My friend, I'll call him Owen, came over the following weekend. Owen has known me for 15 years. He is the specific kind of friend who will absolutely tell you when you've done something stupid, and he is also the kind of friend who will sit with you in a quiet apartment for 4 hours eating terrible food and saying almost nothing, and somehow both of those things make him indispensable. He came over on Sunday, brought food. We watched sports. About an hour in, he said, "How are you actually doing?" I thought about it. I said, "I'm okay. I think I'm actually okay." He looked at me. He said, "You sure? Because that's either really healthy or really concerning." I said, "Maybe both." He nodded. We watched more sports. Then he said, "She was wrong for that post." I said, "Yeah." He said, "But also, you'd been losing her for a while, right? You knew." I said, "Yeah, I knew." He said, "So the post was just the thing that finally let you act on what you already knew." I sat with that for a minute. Then I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what it was." He nodded again. He grabbed another piece of whatever it was we were eating. He said, "Then you made the right call." Here's the late backstory, the part that reframes everything earlier. About 6 weeks after the move out, she texted me. Long message. Thoughtful. She'd clearly written and rewritten it. She said she'd been seeing a therapist. She said she'd been realizing things about herself that she hadn't been willing to look at before. She said she'd been in a pattern, not just in our relationship, but across her life, of needing external validation to feel okay, of using other people's perception of her as a mirror instead of developing her own. She said that the post, the public posting of something that should have been a private conversation, had been part of that pattern, a way of outsourcing the decision, a way of getting the crowd to confirm what she already felt, so she didn't have to carry the weight of it alone. She said, "I know that wasn't fair to you. I know you deserve to have that conversation in private, between us. I'm sorry I did it that way." She said she wasn't reaching out to try to restart things. She was reaching out because she'd hurt me, and she'd needed to say that plainly, without an agenda. I read it twice. I sat with it for a day. Then I wrote back. I said, "I appreciate you saying that. I hope the therapy is helping. I genuinely mean that." I said, "I don't blame you for being unhappy. I do think you handled it badly. But I also know you were struggling with things you didn't know how to name. And I can understand that even if I couldn't accept it." I said, "Take care of yourself." I sent it. I closed the app. Let me tell you what changed in me after all of this. Not in a dramatic, movie transformation kind of way. In a quiet, practical, cellular level kind of way. I stopped dismissing my own instincts. That's the main thing. For months, for over a year, honestly, if I'm fully honest, I had felt something was off, and I had talked myself out of it every single time. Not because I was stupid, not because I was a pushover, because I loved her and I wanted to be the kind of partner who trusted his relationship instead of picking it apart. And somewhere in the process of trying to be that partner, I stopped trusting myself. I stopped believing my own read of situations. I started measuring my perceptions against what I thought I should be feeling rather than what I actually was feeling. And that's the lesson, if there is one. Not about her. Not about Facebook or public posts or the right way to end a relationship. About me. About the cost of dismissing yourself for long enough that you forget you're doing it. I stayed in the apartment. Renegotiated the sublease. Took on some of the costs she'd been splitting, which wasn't fun financially, but it was manageable. I replaced the sunken couch cushion. I moved a few things around. Not a dramatic purge. Not some cinematic clear out where I throw everything away and rebuild from scratch. Just small adjustments. The apartment felt different without her things. At first it felt emptier. After a few weeks, it felt like mine. That transition, from emptier to mine, was the first thing that felt genuinely good. I didn't start dating again right away. Some people do. Some people need to. I needed to sit with myself for a while and make sure I actually liked the person I was sitting with. I worked. I went to the gym. I spent time with Owen and a couple other friends who checked in with genuine consistency. I read more than I had in years. I slept properly, which sounds small, but when you've been anxious for months, sleeping through the night without your brain running laps is a specific, underrated kind of recovery. I thought about the ring, about the day I bought it, the 8 months of saving, the rehearsed lines I'd written and then thrown away because they felt fake. The kitchen, on a Thursday evening, on one knee, holding something I'd worked hard for and offering it to someone I fully believed in. I didn't regret that moment. I want to be clear about that. I don't regret proposing. I don't regret any of the 3 years. I regret losing myself somewhere in the middle of them. I regret the months of ignoring my gut. I regret the 1:47 a.m.s when I knew something and chose not to act on it. But the love? No, I don't regret the love. About 2 months after she moved out, I went back to the jewelry store. Not to do anything dramatic. Not to reclaim something or make a statement. I went because I'd thought about that store credit and I figured I should check what it was actually for. The older gentleman was there again. He recognized me again. He said, "I remember you." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You okay?" I said, "Getting there." He nodded. He said, "You know, in 30 years of doing this, the people who come back, the ones who use the credit for something different later, they almost always come in looking lighter than when they returned the first one." I said, "I'll keep that in mind." He smiled. I left. I didn't use the credit that day, but I thought about what he said. Here's the thing about public posts. About the specific thing she did that set all of this in motion. I don't think she posted it to hurt me. I genuinely don't. I think she posted it because she needed permission. She needed 247 people to hold up a mirror and tell her that what she felt was valid. Because validating it herself, saying it to my face, in our apartment, in private, that would have made her accountable for it. That would have made her responsible for the consequences. The public post kept her slightly off the hook. She hadn't told me. She just said it. In the air. To everyone. And maybe I'd see it. Maybe I wouldn't. And either way she hadn't technically done anything. Except I did see it. And I responded. And in responding the way I did, I took the weight of the decision out of her hands. I made the call that she'd been too afraid to make. And looking back, I don't think she hates me for that. I think some part of her was relieved. There's one more thing I want to tell you. About 6 weeks ago, I ran into someone I hadn't seen since just after the breakup. Her name is Tessa. We'd known each other peripherally for years. She was in the same extended friend group, someone I'd talked to at parties, but never really gotten to know. We ran into each other at a coffee shop. Both ordering the same thing, weirdly. Both reaching for the same table, also weirdly. We laughed about it. We sat together. We talked for 2 hours. I told her I'd come out of an engagement. She said she knew, small world, mutual friends, the internet being what it is. She said, "You handled it well from what I heard." I said, "I did what made sense." She said, "That's not as common as it sounds." We exchanged numbers before we left. Not for anything urgent. Just because the conversation had been easy, and easy conversations are rarer than they should be. I'm not ready to call that anything yet, but I'm not paying attention to it either. September 14th came and went. The circled date on the kitchen calendar. I'd already thrown that calendar away months before, not dramatically, just when I bought a new one in January like a normal person, but I remembered the date anyway. It came on a Saturday. I went for a long run in the morning. I met Owen for lunch. We didn't mention it. He knew what day it was. I knew he knew. We just had lunch. In the afternoon, I fixed a leaking faucet that had been annoying me for 3 weeks. In the evening, I sat on the new couch. I bought a proper one, both cushions solid, and I watched a movie I'd been meaning to watch for a year. I fell asleep before it ended. It was a genuinely fine day. Not a sad day. Not a triumphant day. Just a day. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed it to be. I've thought a lot about what I'd say to the version of myself from 14 months ago. The one who was buying a ring. The one who'd saved for 8 months and written rehearsed lines and thrown them away. I don't think I'd warn him off. I don't think I'd say don't do it or she's not the one or any of the things that sound wise in retrospect and are mostly just hindsight wearing a prophet's costume. I think I'd say this. Pay attention to yourself the same way you pay attention to her. When something feels off, name it out loud instead of quietly cataloging it. The work you put into loving someone should include the work of being honest with them and with yourself when something isn't working. Your instincts are not your insecurities. Learn the difference. And if someone tells 200 people they deserve better before they tell you, believe them. I returned the ring on a Thursday afternoon. I updated my status that same evening. She deleted the post about 4 hours after I commented. By then it didn't matter. What had happened had happened. What had been said had been heard. I've thought about the 3 words I typed underneath her post, "You're absolutely right," and whether they were the right thing to say. Whether a more composed person would have called her instead. Whether a wiser person would have waited. Whether a softer person would have found a gentler on-ramp to the same destination. Maybe. Probably even. But I'm not interested in rewriting the moment. Because the truth is, those 3 words, quiet, clear, no punctuation drama, said everything that months of careful silence hadn't been able to say. They said, "I heard you." They said, "I agree." They said, "I'm done pretending otherwise." They said more in 8 characters than I'd managed to say in 4 months of watching her slip away. I still drive past the jewelry store sometimes. I don't stop. I don't slow down. But I notice it. The way you notice the places where significant things happened, not with nostalgia exactly, but with the quiet acknowledgement that this is a place where something real occurred. I think about the ring. About what it was supposed to mean. About what it means now. About the store credit still sitting in my wallet and used. Not because I'm saving it. Not because I have a plan, just because I'm not in a hurry. For the first time in a long time, I'm genuinely not in a hurry. She posted that she deserved better. She was right. She deserved someone whose feelings she could be honest about without needing a crowd to hold her hand through the admission. She deserved someone whose future she could want in real time, not a future she'd already quietly given up on while smiling at kitchen countertop samples. She deserved to figure out who she was without performing a version of herself for an audience of one who believed the performance completely. And I deserved someone who, when they started to feel lost, came to me first. Someone who trusted our private space more than the public one. Someone who believed that what we had was worth a hard conversation before it was worth a viral post. We both deserved better than what we had. I just happened to be the one who said so first. She posted it to 247 people. I returned the ring to 1. And somewhere between those 2 numbers is the whole story of why it ended the way it did.